Recording starting.
There we go.
All right. Good on yours?
Yeah,
All right,
I
Joe.
see it.
All right, wait, hold on. Because I'm gonna prep this.
I'll get my sip in. I don't got a straw this time.
All right, guys, what is going on? Welcome to another episode of the Natty Roundtable podcast. It's been a little bit. I'll admit we've been slacking, specifically me, on the uploads, but we're back, and I think this is a good one that you guys are really gonna enjoy. We got my guys James and Connor here, who are actually both prepping right now, which we're gonna be doing a little bit more with them with their preps coming up. James is actually 10 weeks into his prep right now. He's got 6 weeks to go. And Connor is 7 weeks into prep with 12 weeks to go. So doing pretty well in terms of the course of time before we actually get to the home stretch here, which we'll do a little bit more content, like I said, delving into both of their journeys a little bit more. But today we're going to be talking about something that I think you guys are really going to enjoy, and that is going to be muscle fiber type and its role in hypertrophy. So to start things off, we want to get you guys the explanation of what muscle fiber types there are and what the difference is when it comes to the physiological body itself. And then we'll get into, like I said, more of the role, sports performance a little bit, but mainly hypertrophy and building muscle. So let's start out, Connor, kind of go over, like I said, what are the main two differences between the muscle fiber types and how many are there and what are their kind of roles, if you will?
All right, guys. So when it comes to muscle fiber types, there are going to be two main types themselves. And what I mean by that, there's slow twitch and there's fast twitch muscle fibers, all right? Slow twitch is also known as aerobic muscle fibers, aka with oxygen. And so that's going to be for prolonged exercise. So we'll say something like distance running or swimming for distance, something like that where you have to sustain for a long time. And then fast twitch is going to be anaerobic, which means which means without oxygen or quick, powerful, explosive. All right. So examples of that could be you're going for that 1 rep max on your bench press. You just got a few reps on cleans or squats, something like that, or like you're sprinting in a 100-meter dash. And I know some people might think, well, what do you mean without oxygen? You know, like, does that mean, do you not breathe during that time? No, you still breathe. It's just, this is the basic concept of with oxygen, the aerobic means where you're going to do it for a while and, you know, you're going to really have to stabilize that. And then without oxygen, it's quick, you know, it's in a blink of an eye. When it comes to the types themselves, there are actually technically 3 types. One is a runoff of another. Type 1 is slow. Type 2A is fast, and then type 2B essentially you can be seen as fastest, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you do have two fast twitch types. So like I said, 2A, 2B. And then that kind of goes into, so I want to get my order down here. I don't want to jump into one thing and go to another. One thing, you know, we've talked about on here before, everybody's anatomy is different, your genetics are different, everything like that. Not everybody is going to have the same exact number of type 1 muscle fibers and type 2 muscle fibers. Some people are going to be we'll say specially designed with one more than the other. Some people, maybe they do have a fairly even amount. You know, so examples of that I wrote down is somebody who might have more type 1 muscle fibers, or maybe they're more proficient with that. You know, going to be like those Olympic distance runners, where somebody who is more proficient with those type 2 muscle fibers are going to be the Olympic sprinters, right? You know, you're never going to see them cross over into the other's realm. And if they were to try and train in the other's realm, they're probably not going to do too good. And then also going into it, I got, like I said, I'm just going over the very basic stuff for everybody here.
Oh, this is good.
Yeah, so when you are doing that max effort, for example, that max out on that bench press, like I said, you're technically not just recruiting the type 2 muscle fibers. You're actually going to recruit all of them. So it's not like your type 1 just say like, I don't want to do anything right now. you still have to recruit all those muscle fibers. But when it comes to training, which I know, again, we're going to get into later, but when it comes to training, you can train those different muscle fibers, obviously with different types of training, right? And then lastly but not least, so one thing, I believe we've talked about ATP on here before. So essentially ATP is something, ATP performance. So essentially ATP is just something that your body creates to the best, in the most layman's terms, ATP is something that your body creates to produce energy to make things happen, right? To explosive movements, we'll go ahead and say, just to make things happen. And so ATP production is going to be more, I don't want to use the word consistent, but that's all I can think of, going to be more consistent towards that type 2, that fast, that explosiveness, right? So technically, and again, this goes into another discussion, let's say somebody was taking creatine, or you're taking in a lot of creatine into your diet, that's going to assist with making ATP. Therefore, that's why when you take a supplement like creatine, after you're using it for a while, maybe you were doing 100 pounds for 5 reps, and in X amount of time, okay, well, now you can push out a 6th rep, or maybe you can go to 105 and do the 5 reps instead, right? So, and that's because that ATP production. Another example might be if I'm a sprinter and I'm doing a 100-meter dash, maybe I start dying out around 85 meters in. Well, maybe this assists me with an extra 5 meters, so therefore my time's going to be quicker because now I have more ATP. It's giving more energy for that extra 5 meters. So now instead of 85 meters to when I really start kind of dying down, now it's 90 meters when I start dying down, which means the advantage there. But again, those are just the basic things that I have over it. I know James is going to go into slightly more in depth than I am.
I think that was perfect, man. I think that was perfect. That they gave you a good insight with things, but like you said, kind of getting into a little bit more of the relation to hypertrophy. Let's start out with that, and then maybe kind of touch on a little bit. Don't go too in depth with that, James. But what is the main difference between that and like someone who is maybe an athlete, like Connor was talking about, like a sprinter or something like that, compared to someone like you guys or someone who's trying to just build muscle from a hypertrophy standpoint?
Yeah. So Connor definitely covered the basics very well. There's a couple things I wanted to kind of add on, which kind of go a little more advanced and kind of explain what the real differences between the two are. So we have our type 1, we have our type 2. You're always going to use your type 1 first. Like I'm using them right now, just moving my arms around. Now, if I were to try and move my arm while lifting the table, I'm going to instantly start kicking in those type 2 fibers because now I have to use more force production. The type 2 have a higher force production capability than the type 1. Along with that, so there's that principle. There's also these motor units are recruited based on the size principle. So that just states that the biggest units are going to kick in first, and then they're also, unfortunately, going to be the most fatigable. So they're going to, at a certain point, have to rely on these smaller units that are less fatigable to kick in to help with lifts. And that's actually one of the reasons you see people shaking during a deadlift or squat or something like that, because those huge motor units are kicking in immediately to try and get the weight up off the floor, and then they're almost immediately fatiguing. And now what you're seeing is those motor units kicking on and off because they're fatigued, they're tired. So they have to kind of replenish, and it's on, off, on, off, on, off. And that's why you see that kind of like shaking on the way up. But the whole time that those bigger units are kind of going through that cycle, the smaller units are helping you maintain that positioning so you're not just collapsing back down. That was something when I learned that, it was a light bulb moment. It's like, oh, like that makes sense physiologically. It's literally a switch and a cycle going. And then, so to generalize really training specifically, your fast twitch, you can kind of think of the deadlift and your heavy movements. So heavyweight, low rep. Your slow twitch are going to be your low weight, high rep movements. And there's never a perfect way to train anything. And there's always a range. Like Connor said, no one's anatomy is exactly the same. So and something I wanted to really bring up is there's no 100% way to know your distribution, and there's no real reason to need to know it. Now, we can make guesses, like Connor said, that Olympic sprinter and the Olympic endurance athlete, their genetic predisposition is completely different, and we can assume that. But for the average person, your percentages are, 5 to 10% one way or the other, and that's not going to be that much of where you need to spend your time training specifically to that. It's kind of a wasted. It would be perfect if we knew it in an ideal situation, but there's so many other factors that come into play with training that I think the motor units and the predisposition for fiber types is kind of like the last thing you should address. However, there are certain muscles that do have a predisposition towards different fiber types. So some that I always like to bring up in this discussion is the gastroc and the soleus. So those are your calf muscles. So gastroc is very much type 2. It's that explosive, quick, that's why sprinters and jumpers have these huge calf muscles, because that's the rounded part of the calf. And then the soleus is actually a flat muscle that goes right underneath it. That's more type 1 dominant. And that's why you see a lot of endurance athletes. They don't have the big rounded calves, but they have these nice, flat, wide-looking calves. That's because they have a very developed soleus and not a very developed gastroc. So the soleus itself, in a lot of studies, has been shown to be 90% type 1 fiber, while the gastroc is only 70%. So there's a 30 or a 20% difference there between the fiber types. Now, that's one muscle I would always train specifically. And to do that, I use varied rep ranges. So if I want to grow my gastroc, what people think of as the calf, I'm going to be doing a heavy movement like a barbell calf raise, a dumbbell calf raise with some big weight. And I'm going to do it in probably a 6 to 12 rep range, because that's what I would say is more of a higher intensity. I think under 6, you're probably just using momentum to do it, and we don't want to do that anyway. And then if I want to train the soleus, beyond the anatomical differences that there are with that, I'm going to decrease the weight and increase the rep range, because then I'm training more for a type 1 fiber.
So what you just gave everyone is the key to grow their calves, essentially, James.
Yeah, you have to train both muscles. It really is.
You
have to train both muscles.
They didn't even know
you have to train them
coming.
appropriately. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
No, that's good info right there.
Yeah. So that's one muscle that's very much predisposition for you, and that's across the board for everybody. Now, most muscles aren't like that. In the same study that gave those percentages, the glutes and the hammies were shown to be just about 50% exactly. So that's why training through multiple rep ranges, you don't want to ever miss out on hypertrophy of one fiber type in sake of getting hypertrophy for another fiber type. Especially, and I'm getting kind of into a rabbit hole here.
Oh, this is good.
Because they're, where is it right here? So yeah, type 2, and one study, type 2 muscle fibers grew 25 to 75% more than type 1. So you can see there's a huge difference in the ability of the type 2 muscle fibers to grow.
Oh.
So we never want to specifically just train for type 1. But also, 25 to 75, there is a decent percentage that is still type 1 hypertrophy effective. So we don't want to go the other way either. And that's why it's a nice middle ground that we want to train. And that's why, because of these findings, I really, really like using a daily undulating periodization, which I won't go into too much detail, but it's you're using multiple rep ranges throughout the week to make sure that we hit all fiber types and hit all fatigue levels for the motor units. That's what I personally use, and that's what my clients use.
No, that's awesome. I think that's solid. One question I do have, because somebody might be thinking like, so is that why someone who is running all the time, like a marathoner, even though they're using their legs, so for the layman, they'd be like, well, no, what do you mean they work out their legs all the time? That's why they don't necessarily have the size in their quads that someone who squats, deadlifts, couldn't run, 5 miles if they wanted to, but they have bigger legs. That's kind of explains
exactly that. Yeah, they're missing out on that type 2 hypertrophy in favor of the type 1 hypertrophy, because those are the muscle fibers that are more efficient for their sport. They don't care about the size. They want to be better at their performance. So they train for type 1, while a sprinter or like a linebacker is going to train more for type 2, and that's why they're bigger.
For sure. And that would be why like it's just from a muscle perspective, it's like the muscle's not going to be there or grow if there's no adaptation for it to stay around or even be there in the first place. No, that totally makes sense. One question I do have with that is then, is there something, and this might be just a loaded question, but like, where's that fine line of someone like for instance, like what I was just doing, where I was running, like I would say between 10 to 15 miles a week, which for my non-marathon training self was a lot, but I was also still doing 1 leg session per week, which I normally would train at least twice. Where would you say that give and take is for someone who's like, hey, I really like running, but I also do want to grow my legs? Like, is it go back to just, you got to have the specificity with your training, or is there a fine balance with things? Is there even any research on that from your knowledge right now?
From what I know, the research is and I actually just read a review article before we did this. They quoted it as murky, because one study will come out and say that, yes, like you should be very specific with your training for fiber type, and the other says, well, there was no benefit, and these hypertrophy with this type, and no, it's very wishy-washy. So honestly, I don't really focus too much on the fiber type beyond altering my rep ranges throughout the week, and I really come back to the recoverability of everything with all my programs. So if you were able to recover from those runs and still be able to perform in the gym and progress on your lifts, by all means, keep doing it. Now, there's going to be a tipping point where you can't do that, and you have to pick, do I want to become a better runner, or do I want to like grow my legs? And that's kind of that balance that every athlete has to decide for themselves.
Yeah, no, that's you hit the nail right on the head, man. That's funny. One of my friends, he plays like semi-pro football, and I think I've told you guys, my buddy, you guys replied to the story. My buddy Jake, shout out Jake Thien. He just got into physical therapy school as well, and so he's well versed on everything like this. And my other friend, he does his programming, so he's like training for explosiveness, like like trying to become the best wide receiver he can, right? And he's going for runs. He sends it to our group chat. He's like, yeah, I've been doing like recovery runs. And we're like, okay, like that's fine, right? And then he's like, and I've been sprinting up all the hills. And we're all like, wait, like no, like you shouldn't be doing that. And then we go back. He had to explain that. It's like, no, that's not the adaptation you're wanting, and you're not going to be able to recover for when you go do a max effort lift then in the gym. But I just thought that was like the epitomization of like, oh yeah, you got to be smart with what you're doing. But no, I felt the effects of that for sure. That tipping point. It's like, do you want to run a marathon, or are you doing a bodybuilding show? Like you can't, or do you want to stay right in the middle there? But no, I think that's solid. Is there anything else you guys wanted to like touch on, or those are kind of the main questions I thought of right now? I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I think people might be wondering right now.
So something really random, but we were talking about, muscle fiber types, and you don't necessarily know which one you might be most, that might work the best for you, so on and so forth. There's actually something, that's what I was looking down on my phone. I was trying to figure out the name of it. I think it's just, Jane, do you know, is it just muscle grafting is what it's called? Like it is a surgery in a way that, let's say I'm curious to know in my quad or in my leg what muscle fiber type I have. It costs a whole bunch of money, I believe. So it's not anything
for the
everybody
average person.
Everybody would be able to do. But essentially what they do is they go in and they take a little chunk of muscle from that area and they pull it out and they do science and they find out, and they can look at it and be like, okay, you're actually this muscle fiber, and you have more of this muscle fiber type than this one. And like I said, I think it's called just muscle graft. It probably has a different name.
The actual procedure is just a muscle biopsy. So they go in, it's literally like a tube, and they just punch it down in, and they pull. It's kind of like coring for like soil samples and everything, except it's your muscle, and it's really freaking painful.
Yeah, why would someone want to do that unless they were like some like an Olympic athlete, or like some like if you're just curious?
Almost nobody does it. It's for scientific reasons. So
okay.
people will sign up to do it as part of a study when they're trying to figure out these hypertrophic differences.
Okay.
I would never tell someone to do it because the gains from knowing that is not worth the money and the pain.
Just go try whatever you're going to try and see if it works, and then we'll figure out if you need to change courses. But you're not a good long distance runner. Like, let's try lifting.
So that is the thing. And thank you, Janet. Muscle biopsy. I couldn't remember the name of it. So that isn't technically you can find out what you have more of. But obviously, like we said, it's not going to be just for everybody to go out and do or anything like that. But I just want to throw that in, just a random little thing.
That's definitely interesting. But I think that was pretty much all I had as far as questions with things. We'll see if anyone has any questions. They can definitely leave them below. But I think this was super informative. I learned a ton, and I think it was really informative as far as the hypertrophy role and overall. I think basically in the scheme of things, I think most people overthink it really overall, and that's where I think a lot of times having this clarity is nice. But at the end of the day, major take-home points is I think from James is hitting all rep ranges so you're not over focused on one or the other, so you are hitting all fiber types, and then from there, obviously knowing what specific thing you're training for is going to be the main mechanism to know where you're going to go with that and how you should be doing things. So for us, hit all the rep ranges, and like you said, we can go into a little bit more of the undulating periodization and how that would work, and I think that would be another topic for another day. So, but I'm excited. I think this is good. This is a good way to get back into things, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Definitely leave a like below, and also leave some comments if you have any questions on this video, any topics you'd like to see us going over in the future, and then also turn on that notification bell because that'll help you guys make sure you see all of our content when it does come out, because sometimes YouTube is on some weird stuff where they're not putting us in your subscriptions. So always, thank you. I appreciate you guys if you're still watching. For Connor and James, I will see you guys in the next one. Take it easy, guys.
See ya.
Boom.